scripture, and it's talking about the dungeons or the pit prison. There were the watchers who created the giants, and other kinds were sent to. And they're called rulers in a dungeon in this translation, the pit prison. And one of them has like a crocodile's face, like the god Sobek. It's just as one sort of example. One has a cat or a lion's face. One has a dog's face. So like Anubis, for example, a jackal.
Right.
Or Nebaz in the Bible, that was worshipped by the Avim giant in 2 Kings, just as the Avim also worshipped Nagel.
Right.
Right. So, and Nebaz is defined in the Hebrew as a barking god, depicted as a god with a dog's head and a human's body that the Avim worships. So we have some biblical references here, just to make connections. So as we go down here, I won't go through all of them. It's interesting, but we also have one that's a bear's face, which is more akin to the Bigfoot one. And so I think if I were to look for a watcher solution, I would look for the one that had a bear's face, and his name was Lucar in the Gnostic, Luchar. And here's what it exactly says. And the ruler who is in the seventh dungeon, a bear's face, his authentic face. This is he who is called in his region with his authentic name, Lucar. And one wonders at the connections to that, to Lycaon and werewolves and things like that, in terms of the transliteration in there. There's also, because Anubis and Nebaz, and Anubis is understood in Greek and Egyptian history of producing prolifically, so much so created a city called Sinoopolis, Dog City. And Sino would be understood as dog. And so, and in the Greek accounts, we have them as being as big as 12 feet tall. These similar accountings for these inexplicably unaccounted for creatures that seem to have a relationship in terms of how they're created within the Bible. And so Caleb actually means dog in Hebrew. Caleb is one of the scouts that is a Kenizzite that is picked up by Moses in the time of the Exodus, who is going to take over the tribe of Judah, and his name is Dog, as it's understood. And he's a mercenary, and these dog people were mercenaries.
All throughout history and all over the continent. That's exactly what they were known for. Wow! That's interesting. I didn't put that connection together.
That you harbor in your heart, but light shines in the dark. You be cutting, is it worth the ultimate price? My light shines in the dark. Shine!
All right, welcome to the Night's Watch. What's going on, everybody? I hope you guys are all enjoying Season 2 as much as I am. So far, oh yeah. It's been banger after banger, because this is all pre-recorded. You guys have no idea what's actually happened. At least not till I premiere it. But anyways, I'm having a great time. So, last episode, we talked with Ray, and we talked a little bit about the giants. Now, the giants are, not something that's very new with what we talk about here. But his story is fascinating. But I feel like we should have a little bit more background. Like, I've already kind of gone over the Nephilim a little bit, but there are those out there that make what I know about the subject look like nothing. Like when I listen to some of these guys, I feel like I'm in kindergarten. You know what I mean? Like they have such a much more broader and deeper understanding. So with that being said, I reached out and I got a hold of somebody. And I think you guys are going to love him because I know I do. Like, yeah, this guy is awesome. He is the GOAT. So let's get our good buddy Gary Wayne up here, shall we? So without any further ado, Mr. Gary Wayne. Mr. Gary Wayne, what's up, buddy?
Just happy to be here. It's a good day, and really looking forward to working with you tonight and to, hopefully talk about things that your audience has, some curiosity on in terms of, can we provide some more information and detail for them so that they can sort of further their understanding, because, there's so many things that are out there in this world that we all have questions about. And it's not like those types of things sort of are situated in a lonely place all by itself. I mean, when we get into these types of topics that I know you like to get into, this is common knowledge all around the world, all continents, all cultures.
Exactly.
It's just a matter of, can we connect those dots?
Right. And, one of the interesting points is like, when the Bible references this kind of stuff, a lot of the times it's like, it already assumes that the people know exactly what the story is and what's going on. So context isn't always there, or it's been taken out by certain nefarious organizations. So it can be a bit of a murky subject, right?
Well, for sure. And there's so much misinformation out there as well. So not only outside the Bible, but inside the Bible. And then there's a lot of restrictions as to what many in the Christian community, and I'm from the Christian communities, if people aren't familiar with who I am. But there's a lot of restrictions within the Christian community as to what you can sort of talk about or raise up into church. And if you do raise some of these questions into a lot of the churches, they'll ask you not to raise those questions again and or leave the church. Right. So it's not, some of the preternatural things that are in the Bible, aren't talked about in church. And what's crazy is the Bible is likely the most preternatural book ever written. And
exactly,
it seems to be a selective amount of preternatural things that wants to be discussed within the churches. But hopefully that'll change as people get more information.
I think that will change. I mean, the end's coming, and then there's also the whole fact of the book of Daniel being kind of sealed for a future generation. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of things kind of play out, and it's kind of like, we can look at that now with our lens and be like, oh, wait a second. I think we understand this now. And it's like, oh. So, we're going to try to do that a little.
And again, the churches haven't taught a lot on prophecy. So that's why so many people are unaware of what's in prophecy. They may read a line out of one of the verses or something, but they don't really get into the prophecy, because again, that puts the teachers within the churches on sort of thin ice, I think, is how they might look at it. That because we don't know exactly how it might play out. Right. We don't want to talk about it, but yet, prehistory and prophecy provide the context for the values that they're teaching us. So and it provides the, a reason for being. And so without that, people have questions, and tearing back that veil is where you start to get some of the answers. And not all the answers are in the Bible. And I'm certainly not going to say to anybody, do not do research outside the Bible, but be very careful to measure everything you research from a Christian perspective against what's in the Bible.
Exactly.
But again, I think that for the audience who aren't Christians, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't read the Bible either. But you should understand why you believe what you believe. And that takes research on both sides of the fence.
Agreed. And as far as research goes, I mean, I don't think we could have anybody better than you. So with that being said, buddy, talk to us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you got to offer.
Yeah, so I call myself a Christian contrarian. And, I may be contrarian by nature, but how I look at myself as a Christian contrarian or a contrarian is that, and it doesn't matter whether it's biblical or non-biblical, it's the same contrariness that I approach things with, is I don't accept what somebody says occurred. I don't accept what somebody says is written somewhere, or they say, here's a paraphrase, and I'm going to paraphrase it for you. I'm not like that. I want to verify things for myself, and I want to understand as best as I can why I believe what I believe. Now, I know you never get to that end destiny, because you learn very quickly that the more you research on things, the more there is to research. So, but you start to get into some lanes as to an understanding of things and how things connect. So that's how I come about being a contrarian, and whether or not it is standard doctrine, dogma, whether it's in the universities, whether or not it's in education, whether or not it's in secular history, whether or not it's in polytheist history, whether or not it's in the Bible, there's so much half information and misinformation and things that people say without having verification for, that you end up in a position where, but I have all this research that says it's a little bit different than that.
Right.
And those differences and nuances are significant. And so that puts me at odds with a lot of the standard sort of teaching. Doesn't mean I can't back up what I say, because I've done that. And another thing that sort of separates me from other people is that I do back up everything I talk about, for the most part, as time permits. When I'm doing shows like your show, I will provide more information and can go deeper than most people have seen people go deep. And the reason why I tend to do that, and deep in terms of the audience, in terms of who the audience is, I might go deeper into mythology in let's say a New Age group versus a Christian group, or an alien mythos group, or what have you, because I do all the spectrum of the shows, because this research crosses over everything. Oh, yes. So I will provide enough information that people will look at it and say, hey, there may be some veracity to what he's saying.
Right. Now, what books exactly have you wrote, just in case people have been living under a rock?
Yeah. So I have 2 books out. And I'm working on a project on a third on my own again, and then in a partnership one. So the 2 books that are out right now are Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 1, which is subtitled How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind, and Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Helps to Define End-Time Prophecy. And then the one that will probably be out early next year, which is more of a fiction story, based in truth. So I guess for people to understand what I'm talking about, it's not really mythopoetic, but it would be probably closer to a Da Vinci style, of book where, again, the characters are fiction. Some of the events are fiction, but it's based on real history. And in this case, prophecy, which is probably will turn out to be a sequel, which is not what the co-author that I'm working with wanted to do. But I said, well, you can forget doing one single book right out of the gate. But he said, no, we're going to do it this way. It's going to be 100,000 words. Well, that blew up like fairly quickly. So it'll have to be done in a sequel. But the first one is basically getting very close to going into editing right now. And it's called the Primo Conspiracy. And so it's designed just to get people to think about how things might come about for the end time. But using a lot of information out of prehistory.
Right. Very cool, man. Very cool.
And the third book for Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 3 probably is a couple of years away, maybe 3. I'm hoping to free up enough time to work on that. It's going to be in a little bit different direction. We'll stem out of the research out of books 1 and 2, but we'll go into a little bit different direction.
Right. Okay. Well, with all that being said, y'all go out there and look into it and get a book because, man, I mean, I've listened to it on Audible, I believe, and it's awesome. It's awesome, man.
Well,
I enjoyed your work.
And the Audible books came out last year, last fall, and are doing quite well because there's a lot of people who just want it on audio. I'm hoping what people will do as well is that because it doesn't put any of the footnotes or the end notes, you don't see how it's backed up. So you may want to get a hard copy if you really like it, or a digital copy just to see the end notes, and particularly what's in the end notes and footnotes. End notes in the first book, footnotes in the second. So it's right on the same page in the second book. But information in there is really important, and also the bibliography. A lot of people will say, hey, I've never seen a bibliography like that, and that's worth the price of admission.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in my situation, like, I have a lot of free time as a welder, so when I'm working, I'm always listening to some book.
Yeah, perfect for the Audible format. Yeah, so many people tell me they listen while they're working and this and that and the jobs that they're doing. And either way, I'm just happy to have both books out on Audible because they're not easy projects to do. And most people will say, we want to do it. And then they run away with their hair standing straight up and turn gray and saying, we don't want anything to do with this. It's too difficult, too costly, too big, too So, I had to find a reader who could handle the words and the information and not mess it up. Because
that's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be. Yes.
Yeah, I've often be sitting there like doing something. I'm like welding, I'm dabbing, I'm TIG welding, and they say something. I'm just like, and I just start yelling, "No, that's not how you say it." Being a grammar Nazi.
Yeah, well, and it's one thing to have grammar wrong, but in the subjects that I write about, there could be up to 10 different pronunciations of the same word.
Right.
Depending on which language transliteration and that you're taking it out of. And so it's, I try not to get too legalistic. And, my publisher was saying, well, make sure they pronounce it the way you do. I said, we'll never get it done if I'm micromanaging how every word is pronounced.
Right. Just be like, look, here's my issues at so-and-so. I'm going to do a voiceover and just insert my word into the recording and then render it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anywho, so, all right. Awesome. Now, I think the way that we're going to kind of start off today with is, I've briefed my audience a lot on the Nephilim, right? And I think they kind of understand Genesis 6 well enough. And I think the problem that most people kind of get hung up at is how after the flood, how did they show up again in Exodus and so on?
Yeah, it's a real good question. And are they the same kind of giant? Might be another question.
Right.
And biblically, we don't get a Genesis 6:4 after the flood. Mm-hmm. We don't get that smoking gun verse. Now, I lean heavily towards, and there's three major buckets, and one of those is second incursion, which is the one I lean heavily for. Don't rule out the other ways as well, but it fits better biblically, I think, than the other versions. And so, when I look at the ways that giants could show up after the flood, because we know they do biblically, because we have multiple verses and more verses than what some people would recognize that is talking about the giants. And there is a distinction with the post-Diluvian giants that are more derived from the Hebrew word Rapha versus Nephil, and the plurals are Nephilim and Raphaim. It's the IM male plural that is applied. So, I'll come back to the second incursion in a second. So there's three buckets. In the bucket that a lot of people are into is somehow they survived the flood, which again, you can make work biblically, but it's a very fine legal argument, which is why I leave a crack open for that. And how they survive after the flood, from a biblical perspective, would be permitted in Genesis 6 and Genesis 7, because if people aren't familiar with it, the creation of the giants is the preamble to the flood story.
Right.
It's the context for the flood story. It leads right into it. Nothing separates it. And in both Genesis 6 and in Genesis 7 in the flood story, it says that God is going to bring the flood and have all the things that he created wiped from the earth in terms of the land, as you take that back to the Hebrew, not in the water. And nothing in the water that we're told of dies, whether or not some do or not. We're not given detail on that.
Right.
And if we have that as an understanding, as a basis, then we know that he did not create the giants.
Right.
So the legal argument is that angels have free choice, free will. That's why they rebelled. That's why they created the giants. And that if they wanted to use their free will, whether it's permitted or not, and it becomes further indictment, because remember, they're not going, for the most part, for their punishment, other than the ones who do the violations. They go to the pit prison, but the fallen angels will not go to the lake of fire, the final punishment, until the end time, at the end of the end time, as Matthew 25 talks about. So when we look at having free will, and that they still believe they could win some sort of a negotiated settlement to live in another realm away from God's oversight, and God is permitting them to do everything through free will, because he's greater than free will from a monotheist perspective, and he's Alpha and the Omega, so he knows every possibility and actually what they're going to choose. So that if they wanted to help them to survive, that would be permitted.
Right.
Because that wasn't really the whole goal. People think it was designed to wipe just the giants from the flood. It was an intercession in favor of giving all the names in the book of life the opportunity to have their names left in the book of life or blotted out. There's a time frame that God is permitting all of this to play out. And it's been harassed by the fallen angels and their spiritual offspring, who were created to ensure humankind do not reach our destiny of being raised up to be like angels in the resurrection in a future time. So when we look at all of that sort of information, then we can look at some of the polytheist accounts, which are numerous all around the world, because the flood story is on all continents, all cultures, all religions, all around the world. They have survival of humans and they have survival of giants. It's just a common doctrine. And who knows what we'll find on Antarctica. So when we look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's a very interesting story because on the 12 tablets, because it has a flood story in it. And it also gives us insight into second incursion and survival. So in the flood story of Utnapishtim and all of his family, they're 2/3 God, 1/3 human.
Right.
Okay, these are demigods. And they're not humans. These are the royales. These are the rulers. These are the warriors. And they are the archetypical ones that are going to be, and the family is larger than the 8 with Noah. It's a large family as you get into all of the details on it. And so this is a giant survival story. And you also have a second incursion written in there as well, because Gilgamesh is the offspring of the fertility bull goddess in Sumeria, Nin or Ninsun, and in other transliterations and translations. And probably translations is the correct choice there. Yeah, right. But sorry about that. But anyways, she's going to mate with King Lugalbanda of Uruk to create Gilgamesh. That's a second incursion because he's 6th generation after the flood.
Right.
And Enkidu, which is created to offset Gilgamesh, is created in the same way to be sort of Gilgamesh's nemesis, but they become great friends. And so that doesn't quite pan out the way that it was designed to do for them, but they're 2/3 God, 1/3 human. So we get the giant creation, and people don't know the dimensions of Gilgamesh, whether it's in the Ugaritic text, whether or not it is in the Sumerian text, the Akkadian versions. He is 11 cubits tall and 7 cubits wide. Now, Josephus says, when you're measuring giants, use a royal cubit because they're the royales. They're populated the top 2 classes, both before and after the flood.
Makes sense,
And that's 21 inches versus 18. Not a huge difference, but it can make a difference. So that's going to make, a common cubit, 11 cubits, to be about 16 feet, 19 feet on a royal. So, and so it does make a difference, but 16 feet would still be huge. And 7 feet wide to boot. Okay, so he's a giant. He's not 6 feet tall. Okay, and so if we look over at the Greek one, and I'll just use that one and move on from the Ark stories, you have Deucalion and Pyrrha, that's often called the Greek Noah in the Greek accounting, except that Deucalion is the offspring of Prometheus, a god. Another giant. So it's Pyrrha, offspring of the gods. So giant survival story. So we have a legal way biblically for that to happen, and a possible another ark that in the polytheist versions, just as in the last Noah story, which is biblically incorrect or parting from the details in the Bible, it's more the Gnostic or the polytheist influence there. It's the fallen angels who build the ark for Deucalion and for Utnapishtim and all of his family.
It's almost like that movie they made had a little bit of inspiration that was outside of the Bible.
Yes, a few things were outside the Bible, but
to say the least.
So, but it's Hollywood. Why would you expect differently? It's Hollywood is polytheist, so of course, it's just they're gonna get some of their stuff in there, no matter what happens coming out of Hollywood. So, and fallen angels could also intercede to help to take them off the earth. And we actually get some accounts in polytheism, like centaurs being created in a cloud and Amakaseth that I cover off in book 1 that was created in the ladder, the centaurs, by Hera within a cloud, which is some sort of technology or something else that might be going on with that type of creation. It could be in another dimension because like biblically for people, for the Christians out there, Baal and his father El before the flood, who are the ruler of the council of the gods, would go back and forth between Sheol and Hades, which is in another dimension in the earth, every day through the cave at Mount Hermon at the base, the gateway to Hades or Sheol. And in Ugaritic texts, they have them coming back and forth there as well. And so Baal is showing that there's a possibility that if they wanted to save them, he could take them there. And in the Ugaritic text, the giants are able to go back between the dimensions using portals. And Ugaritic text is probably the best example, probably, and even in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you have that going into not Nippur, going into I'm trying to think of the Sumerian otherworld. So like
Abzu?
No, that's a god. So it's also the same meaning for a planet there. It doesn't really matter. But anyways, I think it starts with N. It's just not coming to my mind right now. So if it comes up later, I'll mention it. I have a lot of things that flow through my mind at any one time. So
I can imagine.
So we have those possibilities as well. So I kind of put that in one sort of bucket as with angelic help, right? And then the other third one is somehow on the ark. And I'm not much a fan on this. The most closest biblical one that you could get to that I think would fit kind of okay would be with the wives. But I think there's a complication there that these aren't descendants of wives or female giants. A, they're not described that way. And B, we also have to account for how the four races show up after the flood. Right. And I think when you start getting into different species and different races, you're getting into a gene pool mix that is something we can't really understand or say how that would play out and give us both four races and possibly 4 color races of giants as well, or did that happen or not? I don't have that to say that there was different, color of races in the giants. There's a couple I could get to, but not the 4. So it's very, very complicated. On the ark might also include that maybe one of the sons was a giant, which the Gnostics and the polytheists believe. Usually it's Ham. In the movie that you're talking about, they had Tubal-Cain as not a stowaway, but hanging on the outside, just as Jewish mysticism in their legends have Og hanging on the ark. So, and in some accounts in polytheism, all 3 sons were giants. And then in some accounts, everybody on the ark is a giant. That's my least favorite of the group, but I still leave that possibility open because don't have that smoking gun verse that explicitly says, I think when the sons of God and second incursion is another incursion after the flood as the topic that talks about. And so, and using that as sort of the generic title, second incursion, whether or not people have a understanding that there's giants created before Genesis 6, which means it wouldn't be the second incursion, but under the general sort of labels that are put out there, first incursion, Genesis 6, second incursion, it's likely how they would show up after the flood. And what's interesting about that is it fits because we only get Nephilim 3 times in Hebrew, and that's in Genesis 6, and then twice with the descendants of Anak, or the children of Anak were giants, which is again a Nephilim. But this is the embellished part of the scout report by the scouts who were fearful and didn't want to go into the covenant land. And that the Anakim giants is not that there weren't giants. It's just they weren't Nephilim giants. But I think what's going on there is the scouts are trying to terrify the Israelites because the giants before the flood seemingly were larger by the descriptions that we get and had more gifts. There seems to have been a diminishing effect of the giants that show up after the flood. Giants like Gilgamesh, nonetheless, were tall. And biblically, even if you're using Goliath 1,000 years after the flood, royal cubits, 6 cubits and a span is 11 feet 3 inches. And stout, so wide as well. And Og's bed was 9 was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, and he'd have to fit in. So he's going to be as king of Ugarit, as king of Edrei, as king of Astaroth, is going to be 14 or 15 feet tall on a royal cubit, and maybe as small as 12 feet. And 12 feet is more of a standard size that's out there in terms of the Greeks and their mythology and descriptions of Achilles and others. But also Orontes, which the river is named after, was also 19 feet tall, like the same size as Gilgamesh. So we've got a range in here, and maybe a couple different kinds of giants that are going on. But second incursion, you can get there through Genesis 6:4, through the sons of God went to the daughters of men and did so again. And in the Hebrew, that means in like manner, in the same way. So however you want to get at or reinterpret how those giants are created, that's a different argument. But in like manner, these ones are being created, and as it's described literally in the Bible, as through the sexual copulation of humans and fallen angels, and in polytheism of gods and humans. So, for example, with Gilgamesh that we talked about, or Deucalion, or Hercules being the offspring of Zeus and the female Alcmene. So, and that's after the flood. So, again, you have a consistency both in the Bible and elsewhere with the same sort of story, and that the Greeks also had the war, according to Hesiod, recorded that the giants were destroyed in the great wars before the flood, and then a second race of giants were created later, right? So you start to get multiple accounts of maybe both. And again, one of the reasons why I just leave a little bit of crack open for the possibility of survival. And what's also interesting with the Ugaritic text is it's Baal and the Baalim Council of Gods that rule from Mount Hermon that create the Rephaim, which are giants after the flood. And these are giants, and the Anakim are recorded in Deuteronomy as giants, but as Rephaim in the plural, not Nephilim.
Right.
And so Horim, which are giants after the flood, are described in Deuteronomy 2 as giants again, Rephaim. And other tribes of giants like the Avim and the Emim and the Zamzuzim are all, and the Casualhim are all described as giants in Deuteronomy 2, but not Nephilim. So a distinction.
Right. And just out of curiosity, like this is one of those things like where it makes my mind like chase a squirrel, right?
Yep.
And I wonder if like the discrepancy in size and ability is because the spiritual contract that is marriage is not taking place anymore for, legal reasons for them to be able to kind of skirt away from like the repercussions of the first time. And that's maybe why they're not quite, to the same proportions or power of the Nephilim. What do you think about that?
Well, and I think that is more of symptomatic or a byproduct of what's going on. And we get a hint of something's changing after the first incursion of Genesis 6, where God limits all life to 120 years. A lot of people think biblically that that's the commission of Noah, 100 years, but even if you take back to Hebrew, it's not talking about Noah's commission. And if you believe that the God of the Bible is omnipotent, he wouldn't make a math error. Correct. So if you do the math from the time the sons are born to the time they enter on the ark, it's 100 years. And you get the sons born before the Nephilim are created, and then Noah's reintroduced in Genesis 6:5 with his sons, with his commission to build the ark. So it's not going to be 100. It's 120 years is applied to exactly what it's saying. He's not going to have that immortal spirit.
Right.
Dwell amongst humans forever. It's not going to happen, and he's going to limit the physical flesh so that they become the disembodied spirits thereafter, the demons, which is Hebrews 74:96, rooted in 74:99 Rapha, demon, evil spirit. 7497 is the word giant, which are all derivatives of the healing aspect that these giants also had as part of those gifts, at least after the flood. One presumes before the flood as well.
Right.
So
go ahead.
I was just going to say, just the details seems to fit better with these giants being created after the flood, because we don't get giants as patriarchs in the Table of Nations.
Exactly.
So if there was a few that were there, you would think they would be part of the Table of Nations. What we do get is, who is Arba? That's the patriarch of the Anakim. He's not in the Table of Nations.
Right.
Rapha, which would be a patriarch of the Rephaim, isn't in the Table of Nations. We have 9 tribes of Canaanites, of the 12, that don't have a patriarch. All 61 other patriarchs of the 70 nations have a patriarch. But you can take, and I do this in book 2, I take their names back as being named eponymously from a patriarch, because you can do that through the information that we have out there. So, for example, Amorites, which are thought to be giants, they're a hybrid giant, and a Rephaim patriarch would marry a female of the Canaanite, Hittite, Sidonian line, and create these 9 tribes. They probably created more than that, but those are the 9 that are listed.
Right.
And Amorite is Emoré in Hebrew, and it goes back, as you take that back, to the god Amur, and Amaru, as it would be in the Sumerian tradition of that name, just a different suffix on the end, of the Baalim Council. And he created giants that were servants of his in the assembly of the Datanu, the assembly of the giants, also named Amur. And now you have the etymological root for the Amorites. And how can we make that direct connection? You take it back to the original Hebrew, which extends to the original Semitic, which is almost the same language, and it's vowelless. And you find out that all the letters sort of match up. And so now it starts to fit. And so another classic example is, you have a tribe of giants in the Ugaritic text that are gibbering. But the giants are also called mighty, or GBR in the original vowelless Semitic, which is part of the Mighty One translation of giants. Gibor and Giborim, GBR would be the original Hebrew vowelless that came out of the original Semitic vowelless. So RPM is the original letters for Rephaim in the original vowelless Hebrew and Semitic. It's that closely related in so many different ways that you have a direct track to tracing some of those patriarchs back. So that is a better answer for how giants show up after the flood.
Right.
And you would take that back a little bit further, because those are the hybrid giants. When we talk about the 9 Canaanite tribes, hybrid giant human versus hybrid human angelic. So Canaan is the likely suspect to supplying daughters to the Baalim Council from a biblical perspective to create the giants. And this would be the same story that's being done, whether it's at Mount Olympus or in Sumeria. And those gods are the same gods. So it's just talking about the same events with different vernacular names for the gods, and in a different sort of cultural setting. And so you could equate Zeus with Osiris, with Baal, with Anki, and on and on and on around the world.
Right. Yep. Same thing, same people. It's just different culture. But it's the exact same person. It's crazy.
And what's interesting is you have a city of Sodom that's amongst Sodom and Gomorrah that is having this really strange discussion in Jude 1:6 with the crimes of the angels at the time of the flood that Sodom is being equated with. Same with 2 Peter's version on it. But in the case, and that's just a filthy conversation that they're having. And in Jude 1:6, it's talking about the strange flesh having sex with strange flesh. And most people are saying, well, you got Sodom, and that's the root word for sodomy, and that's a possibility. And I'm not saying that didn't go on in Sodom. It probably did, along with other sexual violations. But the Greek word there is heteros. Mm-hmm. And it's discussing a different species. It's discussing a different kind.
Right.
And Sodom is equated with the antediluvian crimes and then destroyed. It's inferring, I can't say it absolutely says it, but I think it's inferring that that is a place of where giants were created.
Right.
Could be many locations around the world, but it would be at least in that location. What's interesting as well is the Gnostics have, I think it's in the tablets of Seth, talks about giants before the flood in their first creation were created at Gomorrah. And then after the flood at Sodom.
Interesting.
Yeah. So now you have something that seems to be lining up what's talking about with what the Bible is saying in a completely different and pulls apart kind of a religion in terms of how they sort of come at things. And so with a follower of the Pantheon versus the God of the Bible. So
and
all of those things, all of those things and more lean me towards Second Incursion as my most favorite, but I leave that crack open just a little bit for survival somehow, some way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to be fair, like in the case of Sodom, one thing that, could also be a possibility. I mean, I understand the root words and stuff like that.
Yep.
But, we also seem to be given context that angels can be a little bit of a shapeshifter. And
more than just an inkling. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, these guys seeing them and being like, oh, I want some of that, and it's because they can be like, you know what? These things can turn into a female if they want.
And these angels, and if you look at the fallen angels who make up the Pantheon, there's male and females. So they can take a gender in that physical form. People will say, well, angels are spirit beings. Spirit beings can't produce offspring because they're spirit. But the Bible clearly gives us account in Genesis 18 and 19, where you have these two angels showing up with Abraham and Jehovah the Elohim before going on to Sodom for the judgment of Sodom. They are physical beings. They can eat, drink, touch. And so we know they can take a physical form. And we also know they can take a physical form of any format that they want. And people will say, well, name me a goddess that's named in the Bible. Fine. How about Diane in the New Testament and Anat in the Old Testament? And there's more. There we go. So we know, and they're called a god or a goddess, and it goes back to the same word as angel and a god in the Hebrew. So we also know in Hebrews 13, for people who want New Testament passages, that in Hebrews 13, we're instructed to be kind to strangers lest we come across angels unaware. So they can take a human form and we may not recognize them as a human, as in Hebrews 13, as in Abraham did not recognize these two angels as angels when he first saw them, but yet when they went to Sodom, they were instantly recognized as angels come to judge them. So they can make their presence known probably with shining opalescent type being capability. And obviously the ability not to show that shining. So we know that they can take a physical form. If they can take a physical form, they're going to have DNA.
Yep.
And they can pass that on if they have sex. And people might say, well, but Matthew says there's no sex in heaven. We're not talking about heaven.
Exactly.
It might be greater, more instant repercussions in heaven. It's illegal both there and on earth. But Luke, you should look at the Luke version. And when you're dealing with what Jesus said, look for the passages and they're not in all of them. Like sometimes there's additional information in the others. I like to use the Matthew template and then put that on to the additional details on. And in this case, the Luke passage, where this is about the time of the resurrection, when we're going to be raised up to be like angels, where we're going to be immortal, and there is no need to have sex anymore. So there's no requirement for marriage. Today we're still mortal. So that's not ruling out the possibility. That's something completely different that's being talked about, where we're going to be like it. And I suppose, even though we're going to have the laws written on us to hopefully stop us from doing it, if we violated creation, we would suffer the laws of creation, we would suffer the same punishment. Right. Once we become like angels, even though we have quote unquote human fathers and the adoption process as you go through the passages in the New Testament. So yeah, it's one of those things where, and I get it, because when I first started on this research, I wasn't researching prehistory. I was a mythology buff and a history buff before, but I wanted to learn about prophecy. So when I got to Genesis 6, and I read about giants, I'm going, this is crazy stuff, crazy world. I want nothing to do with this. That's not what I'm here to do. But the trouble is, it doesn't go away, and it keeps coming up. And the more research you do, and I don't think I should be in a belief system where I have to rationalize what I'm reading and argue it. It doesn't say what it says. That's not how I come about things. If that's what it says as a giant, it's a giant.
Yeah. No, that's just a Sethite. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. The Sethite. Sethite and another Sethite could create another species that is significantly larger, who originally had an immortal spirit and a body that wouldn't die. And that all comes from humans mating with humans. I don't think so.
Yeah. No, I've never cut a finger off and had it grow back. So. Yeah,
which they had the ability to do.
Which is very interesting and never gets touched on. But yes, that's why you got to take the head, right?
Yeah, you have to, because you have to have something that's going to be so suddenly quick and devastating, it does not have an ability to repair.
Right.
And so that's why you have the root word as meaning to heal. 7495. And so when you're reading the Ugaritic text about the Rephaim, they're called healers, because they're using that definition there for the secular sort of translation of a religious text versus 7496 or 7497. But it also says in the Ugaritic text that they could heal themselves and they could heal others. And you would have, like with the Merovingians, there was this long transgenerational mythos that certain giants certain royals had the ability to cure.
Yep.
And that's where it comes from, is through the royals, that are the, spawner as giants, as the spawner of all of the royals, the kings of God, kings of angels. Roy, king, El is a transliteration of El, as in Baal, meaning Lord God. Right? Royals are kings of God, or Rex Deus, as they were understood in, Latin. As kings of God.
Right. And, like that tradition of making sure, like when you go into battle against one of them and taking the head, like that goes up into far more modern terms than what people will want to think about. I mean, if you look at history, like I'm a buff on the Mongols, right?
Yeah.
And like, I remember like when they go up against like the European royals, like specifically, the Georgian king, like, that is exactly what they did to him. They made sure they took his head, and his body was only identified because he had 6 toes.
Yeah. And the Mongolian bloodline was pure blood Scythian or Indo-Aryan giants. And so when we look at a lot of the European, particularly Western, they were not as pure blood. In other words, they had to do more intermarriage to continue to survive. And that trait would leave over time. But amongst the purebloods, they wanted to make sure that if they had a rival, or an enemy, that they're going to stay dead. And the most humiliating death, according to the Egyptian execration text, for a royale to have for a death is to be beheaded. Why? Because it doesn't allow them to get to where they want to go.
Right.
And that is, in their belief system, into another dimension where their gods rule from, to be with their gods. And so that means they're either going to roam the earth as a demon spirit, or if they're a terrible one, right to the pit prison in the sides of the pit. So if they wanted to really give their rivals the worst punishment, they took their heads. And, this taking of the heads comes right down through, up to, say, about the 1800s. It was very commonplace. And what's also interesting, biblically, is in the time of King Herod, who is a Herodian, Edomite, Horim descendant king, right? He is going to capture John the Baptist right after John baptizes Jesus. And he was aware of some of the things and the things that John had for capability. And he took his head. Why? Because this one had seemed to have power like the Royales, and he wanted to make sure he would stay dead. Now you get this really strange passage that follows afterwards when Jesus begins his commission in the Galilee doing miracles. Herod thinks it's John the Baptist. And he's absolutely beside himself because he had his head chopped off. And he he doesn't understand how this could be happening because he thinks it's still John the Baptist. So unless you understand that, even on a biblical basis, what's going on, you miss a lot of the context. When David is going up to Goliath, he takes 5 smooth stones. He doesn't believe he's going to miss because he's got God with him. But Goliath had 4 other brothers. And also there's 5 kings of the Pentapolis, and Goliath was likely the king of Gath as a Gittite. And that's why Ashish is the one who replaces him afterwards and then takes David in, probably because he got promoted because David killed his predecessor, right? So it makes you start to understand a little bit more of the story. But David hits him right in the forehead with a rock. That would kill anybody, and even a giant. He should not have had to do anything else. But what does David do? He goes up, grabs Goliath's sword, and takes his head, and then shows it to the Israelites and the Philistines. And so everybody knows Goliath is not going to get up. He's never coming back. Once we start to understand the context of the details with their ability to repair themselves, we understand why head taking. And there's other examples in the Old Testament of head taking. I cover them off in book 2 as well. So people have a biblical basis on that. But it's the standard of how you killed the warriors. And the royales in history, because the warriors were just, they're not the foot soldiers. The humans are the fodder. But the upper 2 classes would populate, the knights, the cavalry, the chariot riders, in positions like that, the officers. And so those are the ones that they really, and anybody who had this warrior status, because you had the special status of these ones that could kill many people because of their size and their strength, and were a special sort of a level and establishment in the military level of those times as a warrior status. They had to be taken with their heads as well. So,
context is everything. Like when you understand kind of like what's going on there, you can look at a lot of situations like biblically and outside of it, and just be like, oh, I get it. Because this bloodline thing with the royals is an interesting thing, that kind of keeps cropping up. And it doesn't matter where you come at it from. Like you can be super secular and be like, oh, these royals are all reptilians or whatever, right? And it's like you're still looking at the same thing. You're changing up the words and verbiage a bit. And I don't really feel like arguing semantics with somebody, but and it's like it's coming down to, because it seems like There's two different bloodlines that are responsible for all this.
Yeah. And think about what happens in the end time.
Right.
With the mark of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
That there are people who refuse to worship or take the mark will be beheaded. Why?
Exactly.
If it's just humans, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be so specific?
Yeah.
And it's because the giants, although they're working sort of directionally as royals in our history to a goal to dominate the world with one universal religion and one world government to bring about a showdown with the God of the Bible, they're rivals because there can only be one family that's going to rule, one bloodline. So they will not have unanimity once the 10 kings come to power and then Antichrist comes to power. So they're going to eliminate the rivals and make sure they can't come back.
Yeah. Wait. You mean there's more than just one set of bad guys? What?
Yeah. Yeah, the old white hat and black hats as we get brainwashed into accepting, well, the white hats are obviously the good guys and they have our better interests, so to speak, but they do not. If you're human, they do not.
Exactly.
And they have the same ultimate goal. They just have a different way of getting there. And they use that pulls apart strategy to cattle herd us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very true. Very true. Now, one of the bloodlines, the two bloodlines that I hear come up the most that I think is probably the most interesting ones to kind of talk about would be the dragon bloodline and the fairy bloodline.
Yeah. So
what
those
are the distinctions there?
Well, they're generic distinctions, but important distinctions. So you can apply it to all of the royal bloodlines around the world, but apply the dragon allegory to the patriarchal bloodline and the female bloodline to the fairy allegory as the matriarchal bloodline. And it's important to understand because after the flood, females were part of their fertility issue or the most significant fertility issue. Before the flood, giants could produce in great numbers and did not have to produce with humans. But after the flood, there's a fertility issue. And we actually see that come up with that word terrible one, Hebrew eritim, in the definition. Yes, you get the descriptions of the giants and stuff with that in the Hebrew term, but fertility issue and childless. I think it's manifested in lack of females. And in the occult religions and in the royal bloodline, it's the matriarchy, a pure blood matriarchy of kept genes and genealogies that they track. They track their genealogies all the way back into prehistory, into specific patriarchal, matriarchal giants, and to the gods. Because it's the purity of that and the ennobling of that with different ones of pure bloodlines is where they fit into the hierarchy. Now, new dynasties were always started after the flood with a pure blood matriarchal dynasty that would carry the gene that manifests the Rh negative bloodline. And that passes down through the female. And so it's important to track that so that if you are going to start up a new region with a new kingdom as part of, your bloodline and your divine right to rule as provided over that nation by the council of the gods that goes right back to the flood, then you have to have the right females to start that new dynasty. So they have to track those things.
Right.
And so when we look at a dragon bloodline, that is understood as an allegory that shows up in things like Dracula. Right. And Dracula is based on Vlad the Impaler. And Vlad the Impaler was this typical noble Aryan. Aryan means noble. Noble ones. And that he had red hair, hazel eyes, and pale skin. is part of the Scythians or do that, and blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin. The other one, which is sort of the anomaly that, and they tend to be taller, are the dark-haired giants like Gilgamesh.
Right.
They're taller than the red-haired and the blonde-haired ones. We get red-haired and blonde-haired ones biblically, with the Horim being red-haired and pale skin as one example, and the Amalekim and Anakim as two examples of blonde-haired ones.
Right.
But anyways, just to give an idea that this Vlad the Impaler is a character based on for Dracula, which means son of a dragon.
Right.
Right. And Vlad the Impaler is this noble Celt. This is the bloodline King Charles III said, as Prince Charles takes his genealogy back to, or at least in part. Right. And he's on record on saying that. And Vlad the Impaler took his bloodline back to the Egrathi tribe of Scythia, which were produced by Hercules, offspring of Zeus and Alcmene, and the Herculidean bloodline, or Herculides bloodline of the Gyges, which is Greek for giant kings. Right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so we have this dragon allegory that's overlaid onto a giant, and in prehistory they drank blood. Right. Which a vampire does. And there were the mortal, and vampires are the mortal enemies of Christians and humans, right? Giants were there to destroy us from the face of the earth. And they ate us, and they drank our blood and used us in ritual sacrifice. So all of that's just a sort of a literature aspect to the dragon allegory. So you'll see a dragon show up in the coat of arms of the Royals. No surprise there, because heraldry is their taciturn language and imagery of their genealogies that they created in earlier times for when they were going into, let's say, riding into another realm on their horse. They would have a standard that had their coat of arms, which would show the local royale who they were and what bloodlines they came from, right? So it was a way of introducing themselves as they visited around. And so we have titles that come down like Pendragon within the Tuatha De Danann. And those are the tribe of Danu or the tribe of Diana. These are the Datanu in another transliteration, which is the assembly of the Tatanu giants in the Ugaritic text. D and T is interchangeable in the languages of the ancient languages. That's where Titan comes from. And just to give a couple quick examples of how we get back to them as being giants, and more red-haired giants, right, than blonde-haired giants within Scotland, Wales, England, and Ireland, versus more blonde-haired ones and red-haired ones in places like Sweden, Norway, Germany. A little more red hair showing up in Russia, which is a branch of the Puchianan bloodline, that or Scythian. Red hair shows up in the Mongolian line and the pale skin, right? So,
like Genghis Khan was famously redheaded with green, slitted cat eyes, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so red hair was the preferred hair color than the lower visualized in the hierarchy of the blonde hair. So that's, and it'd be more that strawberry blonde hair in its original sort of understanding. So in that Pendragon analogy, you have other literature that will demonstrate this bloodline as well, with King Arthur, a Tuatha De Danann descendant, who is son of Uther Pendragon. So Arthur's a Pendragon and a patriarchal king, and his queen is a fairy queen, Guinevere, whose name means in Old Welsh and Old Irish as basically a banshee or a spirit type of being. And that's the allegory being portrayed there, is a fairy queen and a dragon king. Right. So what's with the dragon, though? Well, seraphim angels were the most prolific producers of the giants, and they dominated most of the pantheons at the top level. So you have a seraphim that is described as 6 wings, copper fiery colored and a serpent's face or a dragon's face, because in antiquity they were the same thing. So seraphim are heavenly dragons.
Yep.
And they would take that form when they took a physical form on the earth. So when we look at gods that are depicted like the Uraeus gods throughout the Middle East, like El and Baal, for example, out of the Canaanite pantheon. Uraeus gods also included gods like Osiris and his consort, who I won't say because it's related to a terrorist name, just to be safe. And original Greek gods were depicted as serpent gods. Enki and Enlil are serpent gods. Tiamat, Apsu. The Sumerian gods were mostly serpentine gods. You have the feathered serpent and the plumed serpent in the Kishamai. You have the dragon creator gods in China. You have the Naga gods in India. You have the other dragon gods that go out through Southeast Asia. And it's a constant around the world. And in prehistory, before the flood, the kings were shown as serpents as well, and described in the literatures as serpents. Why? Because they looked just like them initially.
Yep.
After the flood, it's the same way, but then things change. It's that fertility issue that they're going to go extinct because they can't produce enough females, and they like to kill each other too, as well as humans.
Yes.
They have a war gene in them that is just incorrigible, so to speak, and continues, even into World War I, where it was a war of first cousins.
Yep.
All on a first name basis, and all who knew each other and were friends.
Yeah.
They ruled the world like that all the way through. And so that's the allegory of the dragon and the and the matriarchy for the female in terms of how they describe that. And of course we see literature written around that because it holds their history. Why? Because they controlled the top two classes, which included all of the educated class.
Right. Yeah. Great call. Great call. And sorry, I'm a little bit distracted right now. I'm trying to figure out why in the world my camera is suddenly out of focus. I don't know what in the world is going on with it.
You're in focus at my end, so.
Oh, wait, the hand must have fixed it. Awesome. Cool. I didn't want to be distracting while you were talking and do that.
No worries. And
cool, that worked. Awesome. All right,
I was just going to say, there's an interesting show, TV show and movie series that was out in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s called Highlander. And it was using a matriarchal allegory that's sort of meshed into a patriarchal aspect, because most of the warriors there are all males, right? And they're going to go around and kill each other because there's only going to be one that's going to end up ruling the world.
Right.
And they have to take their heads with those swords. And then they have the quickening, which is the energy and the life force coming into them versus the drinking of the blood of the dragon allegory.
Yeah, good point. I mean, Hollywood, they got to put everything out there, don't they?
They do. And they're there to immerse us in their belief system. Most people just haven't researched enough to recognize that the entertainment, say on almost, let's say 99% basis is polytheistic.
Yep.
And we don't understand the allegories, the characters, the belief systems, the history that they're weaving in there, but they're there to keep the mythos going.
Right. For sure. And I don't remember what it's called. I mean, it's basically some kind of sigil magic that they do, plus, them telling us what they're actually about somehow absolves them of some kind of karmic debt, which is why they do it the way they do. And I don't really know how all that works, but it's interesting. It's on us. If we don't pick it up, then it's not on them anymore, is the way they kind of look at it.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the other interesting thing about all that stuff going on, I mean, we've touched on so much that, oh man, you've tickled my tism so much. I've enjoyed all this. Now, I want to shift gears a bit though and talk a little bit about chimeras, because here we talk a lot about, Bigfoots, Dogman, and that's also because Well, one, I've experienced it and seen them. So, I mean, that colors a lot of my worldview on this stuff.
Yep.
But, you know, I always tell everybody, hey, it's still all connected biblically, you know, and, well, I've got you, the wealth of knowledge here. So help me connect some of these threads a little bit. I want to get your take a bit.
On Bigfoot and other types of creatures and Chimera creatures? Sure,
yeah. Let's do Bigfoot just to make everybody mad. I would love to do this.
Yeah, so, you know, Bigfoot is associated around the world with the little people, which is another standard legacy on all the continents, and in the same groupings with the elementals as you take the fourth category in there. And Bigfoot's also considered intelligent, and its eyes glow, and giants' eyes glow. That's why they're called the Shining Ones, and they're associated with caves and portals. And so all of this says this is kind of interesting, and a lot of people who, if they're not familiar with the Bigfoot research, don't understand that Bigfoot is on all continents, all around the world, both before and after the flood. It's this lingering sort of mythos.
It must be the best swimming monkey that's ever existed.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? Yeah, because I don't recall it listed on the Ark or anywhere else. So, but it seems to be an intelligent being. It can communicate either with its different sort of sounds or tappings and other things as well. So, but it's smaller, even though it's hairy like giants are described as quite hairy. It's still different and smaller than the giants, right? It's something unique here. And there doesn't seem to be much interaction in terms of interracial or interspecies reproduction. There seems to be some research that has some genes that are connecting Bigfoot and humans, but that's not significant enough to really sort of affect what's going on here. So Chimera is an ancient technology that was used in the world before the flood, and perhaps again very shortly after the flood, before the offspring gods also go to the pit prison for the same crimes. Right. And I'm going to come back to this pit prison because it's significant in this discussion. And so, Chimera is something that is unique from Bigfoot because Chimera has like DNA manipulation of multiple different species, but yet a sentient being nonetheless, and some sort of spirit that is coming from the fallen angel as well. So there's a technology that's applied, similar to what's going on with Hera and the centaurs in the cloud. There's something that they're doing with DNA manipulation. King Humbaba of the Cedar Forest in the Epic of Gilgamesh is Chimera as well. And he's called the Terrible One, created specifically to do terrible things to humankind, which is why Enkidu is going to get killed or executed, because Gilgamesh and he go to Mount Hermon, to the Cedar Forest, to kill King Humbaba, and Enkidu does it. So again, something distinct more is going on there. And maybe in the Sumerian thing where they have 2/3 God, 1/3 human, might have something to say there's a DNA manipulation in there as well. Right. Versus a demigod would generally be understood as 50% God, 50% human, but in Sumeria, they make a bit of a distinction there. Maybe that's why they're larger. I don't know, and slightly a different watcher, which is really what we kind of want to understand here is that watchers there's 4 groups of watchers that are in the throne room. And so archangels, which have a human head, you have seraphim, which we've already covered as serpentine dragon angels. Ophanim and cherubim are the other 2. Ophanim is mentioned in the book of Enoch, also in the Bible, but not in English. So we have the cherubim in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10. You have these wheel angels, and those concentric wheels that are going around and around is the Hebrew word gagal, but the angel that's in there in the wheel, when it's associated with the angel, is Ophan, and the I am plural, Ophanim. And one of the faces is a cherub versus the four distinct faces on a cherub, which is a bull or an ox, a lion, a human head, dark-haired, and a bird's face. So when a cherubim would take a physical form, it would take one of those faces. So it would look like a sphinx, for example, human head or lion head, whichever one you want to apply there, or a bull's head as you get into the caribs in the Middle East. And CH used to be pronounced K in the original, in the Hebrew as carib. So not cherub, or as Horim is CH, sometimes it's pronounced with an H sound, with C is silent, but we don't pronounce that as Herub either. So our cherub is a transliteration. And so gargoyles would be representations of a bird-faced cherubim. Or you also have representations of an eagle-headed cherubim on Sumerian reliefs, these stocky angels with wings with an eagle's face, and you get the same relief with a dark-haired, black-bearded angel with wings as well, except that it's got a human's head on it, right? So that's the cherub taking those individual forms, and it just so that people sort of understand and follow me on this. So as a single form, if a lion-headed god like Nergal, like Mahis, Sekhmet. Okay, just a few gods of the pantheon, and there's many of them, not as many as the serpentine gods, decided to create giants. They would create giants that look just like them. Maybe not as big, depending on how, one's interpretation on that. But now all of a sudden, when you get the Urmalalu in Sumeria that's on release, you have these lion creatures depicted two different ways, some with a body of and these are warriors, so it could be a cherubim too, with a body of a lion and a head of a human, or a human-like head, or a lion's head and a human body. So Nergal is typically, as a war god in Sumeria, depicted as a lion's head and a human body. That would be the more traditional one. And so if he produced, what would he produce? He would produce like lion men of Moab, like men of Gad, or Arioch, a king of the Mesopotamian giants. That means lion-like. And, and the Hebrew word is Eri and Ariel, different forms of that in the Hebrew. And you have Eri as an Aryan that's right in that, which were the giants, right? So, and these were understood in the Bible as Gibborim, those mighty ones. As the wilderness men in one of the translations should be mighty one or Gibborim, however, but the Hebrew word is Gibbor. So, these were warriors. And so, when we understand this understanding, let's get right. We'll come back to the dog ones, but let's get now to a watcher that might be one that creates the Bigfoot. So so interesting what's in Pistis Sophia. People aren't familiar with that. And in the book I have, it's book 4, chapter 126, and I pulled it up here as I was preparing. It's verses 32 to 322. So this is a Gnostic scripture, and it's talking about the dungeons or the pit prison. There were the watchers who created the giants, and other crimes were sent to. And they're called rulers in a dungeon in this translation, the pit prison. And one of them has like a crocodile's face, like the god Sobek. It's just as one sort of example. One has a cat or a lion's face. One has a dog's face. So like Anubis, for example, a jackal. Or Nebaz in the Bible, that was worshipped by the Avim giants in 2 Kings, just as the Avim also worshipped Negel. And Cuth. right? So, and Nebaz is defined in the Hebrew as a barking god, depicted as a god with a dog's head and a human's body that the Alvim worships. So we have some biblical references here just to make some connections. So as we go down here, I won't go through all of them. It's interesting, but we also have one that's a bear's face.
Mm-hmm.
Which is more akin to the Bigfoot one. And so I think if I were to look for a watcher solution, I would look for the one that had a bear's face, and his name was Lucar in the Gnostic. Luchar. And here's what it exactly says. And the ruler who is in the seventh dungeon, a bear's face, his authentic face. This is he who is called in his region with his authentic name, Luchar. And one wonders at the connections to that, to Lycaon and werewolves and things like that in terms of the transliteration in there. There's also another one with a bull's face, other ones with serpentine faces, one with a boar's face. And the thing is biblically, where you don't get all of the descriptions of the angelic hierarchy.
Right.
We get some like the seraphim. We know what the cherubim are. We know what the Ophanim look like, but we don't know what the powers look like. And we don't even get a Hebrew word for powers. We don't know who the mighty Icarus and Escusia are. We don't know who all the various ones that are listed in the New Testament. We don't know what they look like. But if one deduces that when they're described similarly to other ones in the pantheon, other descriptions of gods, that they would be part of the fallen order as well. And there would be angels that would just look just like them. So I would look at that as being a possible, and maybe even with some chimera aspects to it, DNA manipulation to bring it down in size, or maybe it shrunk in size over the years for some reasons through other species interaction. But again, we have no evidence of that. So now the Anubis one is really interesting for the cynocephalus. Because Anubis and Nebaz, and Anubis is understood in Greek and Egyptian history of producing prolifically, so much so created a city called Sinoopolis, Dog City. And Sino would be understood as dog. And so, and in the Greek accounts, we have them as being as big as 12 feet tall. So, and we have dog giants that show up not only in North Africa, and in Egypt, in Greece, in India, Southeast Asia, all throughout China, and were considered, giant warriors, but distinct from the offspring of the Tengu, which were the Watchers, which is the Southeast name for Watchers. So Tengu are also depicted in Japan and Southeast Asia as these bird people. These bird giants and priests, and in the Popol Vuh as the Xibalba, as owl-faced demigods, and one particular one is the House of Camazotz as a branch of that, which literally means Batman. And you Google Camazotz and you get the Batman outfit that comes up on Google, which is really crazy. Bizarre. Yeah, a superhero. Yeah, so you have these similar accountings for these inexplicably unaccounted for creatures that seem to have a relationship in terms of how they're created within the Bible. And so Caleb actually means dog in Hebrew. Caleb is one of the scouts that is a Kenizzite that is picked up by Moses in the time of the Exodus, who is going to take over the tribe of Judah, and his name is Dog, as it's understood. And he's a mercenary, and these dog people were mercenaries.
All throughout history and all over the continent. That's exactly what they were known for. Wow! That's interesting. I didn't put that connection together.
Yeah, so it's, and dog is not considered well in the Bible.
Right.
Even by Goliath. Because when David's coming at him and he's looking at David, he says, "What am I, a dog?"
Right.
I'm superior to the dog people. I'm higher in the hierarchy, is what he said.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think we can make a case that you have chimera creatures that are somehow adding to the DNA manipulation. You have other ones that are just from different kinds of watchers. And then you have smaller and other beings. If we get into the cryptoids, that's a whole different thing. Now, I'm not sure how an angelic being mates with a insect of some sort. But you could do DNA manipulation or some sort of angelic technology to do that. But I don't have anything that I can actually sort of point to with any sort of veracity that leads it back to a watcher. But the technology of the angels and was at such a zenith before the flood, they could do all sorts of DNA manipulation. And biblically, we know this because not just with the examples that I said, but as one of the reasons for the flood, that the whole earth was corrupted and all flesh on the earth was corrupted. That's the Hebrew word shakath, which means to pervert, to ruin, to decay, to destroy. Words like that, that something is changing the DNA in all the flesh, in all the plant genomes. And it's not just the intermarriage, it's something more, that everything is corrupted, so much so that God is going to call the representatives of each of the species on the word, each kind, as that's understood, as you take that back to the Hebrew as species, 7 pairs of clean and 1 pair of unclean animals to restart the earth, because he knows the ones that are not corrupted, just as the 8 that would go on the ark would be uncorrupted both physically and spiritually, right? They'd be followers of God and not giant DNA. It just seems so counterintuitive to think that God would say, I want to spare some of the giant genomes. I mean, he could if he wanted to, but I'm not sure that actually makes a lot of sense. But I'm not going to stand in judgment or as an equal of God and try and figure out what's going on in God's mind, because I have no capability to understand something that big. So I'm not that smart. So it just seems sort of unlikely that anything that was going on in the ark wasn't called for a reason. And that's the purity level. And that's why unicorns weren't called.
Exactly.
They're not these innocent things. They're what I would call prototypical chimera type creature. And they were the horses that the antediluvian Nephilim rode into battle with. And they needed to have DNA altered animals to make them big enough so they could ride on them, because they were so freaking big. And then after the flood, they actually created post-diluvian unicorns, whether or not they had horns or not. I'm thinking probably not, but they were larger animals, and it's horses that all of the royales and giants would ride into war. So you can, if you see like the movie on the 300, for example, and they'll see that the Persian king is giant-like, right? And he's got these giant white horses. These are what we have as the descendants of these ancient horses as the Lipizan. Downgraded in size for the size of the beings as you come down. They're genetically mated to do so. And these were in place, and white horses were the most popular ones for the most powerful. And so we had them in place with the Indo-Aryans, with the Scythians, who were horse riders and inventors of the chariots, right? And were masters of war. That the people of Babel migrated after 101 years, with the confusion of the languages, to live amongst to the aboriginal giants that were already there. So second incursion earlier than that, or ones that were surviving. However you want to get there, right? But they're going to move amongst the Aboriginals. So the peoples that they're moving into, as with the Canaanites, are moving in with the Aboriginals, with the Rephaim. And these tribes are described as before the people of Babel coming there.
Right.
In their not only their descriptions, but their definitions that come with it. So all the giant tribes, I won't go through all of them. I already listed a number of them before. So, so once we have this sort of, understanding, it makes sense that, the DNA manipulation was part of what's going on in terms of what happens at Babel. And what I say about that is that it's being applied. And how do we get there? Well, the Bible gives us a hint at this, is that acting as one people with one language, nothing they decide that they want to do will be beyond their capabilities.
Right.
Where did the knowledge come from? To do this? Where did the knowledge come from to build Babel City and Babel Tower?
Right.
Where does that come from? We're told it's of significance that they have to be confused. Not that we're not told that they're being dispersed and their language is confused because they disobeyed what God said, and they did because they were supposed to spread out around the world.
Right.
But they didn't. They huddled there in fear. Fear from who? Why would you build a city with high walls? Why would you build this tower? And how could you ever build a tower that could get into heaven?
Let alone wage war.
Yeah. Now,
wasn't Nimrod considered a Gibberine too, if I'm not mistaken?
Well, yes, he is he became a mighty one.
That's right.
Hebrew Kal-El.
Right.
And if that sounds familiar, the name of Clark Kent
Kal-El.
is Kal-El, and his father is Jor-El. And of the house of El. El is in the Canaanite pantheon. That is the father of Baal. Right. And then you have this serpentine S that's on it because there were Uraeus serpentine gods.
Yep.
Can't make this stuff up. And so Nimrod somehow became one. We're not told how, but we are told with that word in its larger definition that it can include rituals and sexual rituals and breaking of bonds and all things that you would associate what Nimrod was doing. But again, no explanation as to how that came about. But that implies if he became, he either had superpowers given to him because he was born of Cush, right? So we know he's from a human descent, and he's in the Table of Nations. So he's not originally Nephilim or Rephaim. He somehow becomes this way. So it infers possibly DNA manipulation or something else that's going on through the cult religion of knowledge, the antediluvian Enochian mysticism. So the Gnostics and the secret societies and the Polychronicon of the Royals that comes down through the upper levels of the secret societies. And as we get a glimpse of some of it in the history of Freemasonry by Albert Mackey in the 1850s, a high level adept of that time, is that there was this knowledge that had the ability to destroy the earth by fire before the absolute knowledge, and that this knowledge that was developed through Enoch, son of Cain, not Jared. He develops the knowledge that Cain learns from Adam to run this huge piece of property from the Nile to the Euphrates called Eden, and teaches it to his sons. And then Cain teaches it to Enoch. Enoch puts it into the 7 sacred sciences that we would know as the 7 liberal arts today. And he continues to develop the knowledge. And then that merges with the angelic technology at the time of the creation of the giants. And then he creates Enochian mysticism, the sun-worshipping bull cult before the flood. And so this knowledge is in this initiated mystery religion, same religion as Atlantis, for example, or Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism as we would understand it before the flood, and the religion that comes after the flood. And
real quick, before we go too much further, make sure that we make the distinction: 2 Enochs, folks. There's
2 Enochs.
One.
Yep. One son of Cain, one son of Jared.
Exactly.
And they get conflated all the time, particularly by the polytheists. Yes. And so they want to preserve this knowledge that can build Machu Picchu, the pyramids, and all of these other things that we can't do today, that we're still catching up, because it's going to be like the days of Noah. We're just starting to get there. Right. And so they don't know what's coming, whether it's a flood or destruction by fire. But destruction by fire is reserved, according to 2 Peter 3, for the end time.
Right.
But they think it could be either. And so they're going to hide all of their knowledge and this will be allegorical and understood differently by the adepts in terms of the volume and the type of the knowledge. In 36,525 books and 9 vaults stacked on top of each other under the Great Pyramid. This is the Masonic history. And so they put the directions to this bank of knowledge on 2 pillars. There's 2 different versions of it. One is that Enoch, son of Cain, makes the pillars. The other one is Lamech. There's 2 Lamechs in the genealogies too. So we're talking about the genealogy of Cain here. And so a fellow by Hermes, or Harmine, as he's said to be in the Old English version that I read, discovers one of the pillars, the one that floats, because the flood comes. Right. And he gets that knowledge and he takes it back to Nimrod. And Nimrod initiates 1,000 Masons and implements this knowledge to build Babel City and Babel Tower, and he becomes the first Grand Master of the not of the Freemasons, of the Masons. Masons are the more ancient order. Freemasonry comes about 1317 with the Templars moving over from France, but that's a different rabbit hole. He writes the first constitution for Masonry after the flood. But this knowledge in the secret societies take their beginnings back to Enoch, son of Cain, as their major patriarch. Right. And also Lamech, son of the Cain genealogy. Tubal Cain's in there as an offspring of Lamech. Nama, Jubal, and Jubal are also in there. We get hints of that knowledge with their descriptions as those 4 listed in the Genesis genealogy as well. Right. So how does somebody say, I am going to build with mud bricks a tower into heaven and kill God if he gets out of line? Oof, yeah. That would be a madman. Yeah. Unless it's a technology that comes with the building of it. And what's interesting about the Akkadian version of the Tower of Babel, and if people aren't familiar with this, we have Babel accounts in Central America with the Aztecs, with the Quiché Maya. We have Armenian versions. We have Akkadian versions. We have Sumerian versions with Eridu. And a couple of fairly famous writings at Eridu and the tower that was built there by Enmerkar versus Nimrod, but it's actually Nimrod. They're both third generation, and the story is exactly the same, but just through a polytheist lens versus the monotheist lens that the Bible tells the Tower of Babel through. And that in the Akkadian version, Babel, as in that transliteration, would be Bab-Alu, I-L-U, versus Babel, meaning confusion of languages, that is used for the definition and probably changed to match what happened there versus what Bab and El, or an angel or a god, would likely mean. In the Akkadian version, they don't have Bab-Alu meaning confusion of languages. You have ILU as a transliteration of EL for a god or an angel, and Bab as a gateway or a portal or a stargate. So this is a portal technology of the gods, and now it starts to make some sense. If he had a technology that could go interdimensional, he might be able to get into heaven in his thought process and kill God if he ever brought something like the flood again or did things that he didn't want. Or maybe
Right.
He might have even wanted to go into Hades or Sheol, to the pit prison, and let the gods he's worshiping and their religion that they worship those gods in out, because he's become like a giant. He's adopted everything they do, including their warrior gene, including their religion, the technology, and how he becomes a tyrant, which is part of the definition of a giant or a bully. And gods and Nephilim were called bulls in the Ugaritic text and in Sumeria and elsewhere around the world. So don't let anybody tell you tyrant doesn't go back to a giant, or bull or bully doesn't go back to a giant. And tyrant goes back to the Gyges kings, who were tyrannos, that were the offspring of the Cretagens of the Zeus Herculides bloodline. And understanding Gyges is coming from Gyges in the singular, so it should be pronounced Gyes, but Gyges is the singular, meaning giant. Gyges would be giants, and Gyes is the plural version. So again, there's just more descriptions. Now, if you look biblically for Christians here who are listening in, when Jesus is being mocked by the bulls of Bashan, you now know these are the fallen angels, not in the pit prison, that are mocking Jesus on the cross that the book of Psalms talks about, and disembodied spirits of the giants.
Right. Man, there's just so much. There's so much. Man, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, and what's interesting is on the elementals, is that, which are the little people, is they're created from the gods as well, but as little people. So one might look at maybe a DNA alteration to make them a lower being, because they're the lowest class in the occult visible hierarchy. And again, they're both before and after the flood. And so there's 3 groups of little people. And there's also one group that's a larger one, and they're called salamanders, and the reptilians. So they're more like these reptilians that people sort of talk about in the alien mythos, and in the reptilians in underground cities and tunnels and stuff in the earth. They're called elementals in the occult because they're each are associated with air, fire, earth as the 4 elements, right? And in occult history, the little ones, I haven't figured out what the salamanders were doing, but they're higher than the little ones in terms of the elementals. So they may have a different thing, but the little ones had specific roles for the demigods. And so there's 3 different groups. There's leprechauns, that's the mischievous ones, and you're going to get like pixies and brownies and other ones in there. Imps, Menhue, and Hawaii, these are mischievous ones. You've got the little people, which are good-looking ones. These are like the Neroids and the sprites and the mermaids and the light elves and the sylphs and ones like that. Ugly ones like trolls, dwarves, and hobbits, and gnomes. And what's interesting about the gnomes is these ones were in charge of the technology, the genealogies, and all of the knowledge for the demigods. The dwarves would live in the earth and make the weapons of the gods, just as they're shown in the Lord of the Rings. And separate from the dark elves, and the ugly ones are the white elves that are shown in Lord of the Rings, which is an allegory of the Shea people, or the Tuatha-De-Danann giants. They're the noble ones, right? They're the noble race there. And of course, they have red hair, blonde hair, pale skin, hazel eyes, and blue eyes.
And have an aversion to iron, too, for some interesting reason.
Yeah, some interesting reason. And so the gnomes, they have technology, and they come through fairy domens, fairy portals. With what we would call UFOs or UAPs, but some sort of technological flying machine. They kidnap people, do sexual experimentations on them, all sorts of other things, need some form of genetic boosters from the humans to continue to survive. And these are called the gray gnomes. And I put two descriptions of these fairy abductions, which have happened all throughout our history. One was a couple hundred years ago that I record. One is about 400 years ago. And if you didn't know it was a fairy gray abduction, you'd swear it was a gray alien abduction, both in the description of the gray gnome and all of the details. So they're depicted, if people are like the Greys or the Asgard in the Stargate series, depicted as the same way. So all of a sudden now you've got an alien mythos that you're starting to say, what's going on? Is this kind of similar to this technology and these superiorly technological beings, being the angels, creating other creatures, as being the same story, but just seen through an alien mythos?
Right.
And let's face it, angels are aliens. They're not from the physical world. They come from heaven. So they are technically aliens. And so we actually get a biblical basis for this, which is really scary in terms of the elementals. So in Galatians 4, 3, and 9, you have these elementals that enslave us in the world. And they're associated with fallen angels.
Yeah.
And that word elemental is the Greek word stoichion, as you take it back to the Greek, and it can mean a basic element of the world, that makes up the physical universe, and a larger element as the occult would understand it, as in earth or fire or air. And it's also, stoichion is also translated in Colossians 2, 8, and 20 as rudiments that are associated with fallen angels and enslave us in this world. And this is part of the visible hierarchy that the royals are part of. That answer to the Council of Gods in Psalms 82 that rules over the 70 nations, and Deuteronomy 32:8 as you link Exodus 1:5 and the Table of Nations in there for the 70 patriarchs.
Wow. Man.
Gives you something to think about on how this world works.
It really does. It really does.
And the disinformation and the misinformation that we're fed that give us parts of the information, but not enough so that we can really connect that this is one cohesive organizational structure that Satan sits above over the Council of the Gods.
Exactly right. Man, I think you've given the audience so much to chew on tonight, and if they are not inspired to go out and get some of your works at this point, or at the very least follow everything that you've been on, then shame on you guys. Shame on y'all, because my mind is already blown. Like, I already know plenty of this stuff, but even still, you're still blowing my mind. It's awesome, man. I'm loving it. But I got two questions. Okay.
Yes.
Well, wait, one question. Do you have an extra 15 to 20 minutes maybe that we can go and do an overtime with?
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, in that case, with that being said, let everybody know one more time where they can find you at, and we'll end this and go straight into the overtime.
Yeah, so the best place to get a hold of me or my books is to go directly to my website, the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's with the number 6conspiracy.com. On that website, I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of Book 1 and all 84 chapters of Book 2. You can't believe how much information is in the book. That is, even though there's generous excerpts, that is just a drop in the bucket of what's in each of the books. But you'll get a good feel through the table of contents and reading some of the excerpts, whether it's the right book or books for you. And so you can get a signed copy if you wanted to support me in my research. That's the only contributions I take unless I go publicly speak. And if the convention makes money, then I would accept a donation on that. So if you wanted to support me, go to the Buy Now page. And the Buy Now page has 3 categories: Buy Page 1, Buy Page 2, Buy Page 3. Buy Page 1 is Book 1, Buy Page 2 is Book 2. By page 3 is the bundling page with discounts. You've got discounts for each of the first 2, but you can only buy one of those books. I can't do it any other way with the format that I have and have all the other security that I have to have. Based on a lot of the research I do, I need to have security like you wouldn't believe. So if you wanted to purchase from me, that's the easiest way to do it and get a signed copy. And even though I live in Canada, I am shipping with duty free. My books are published in the U.S. I just have to go through all of the bureaucracy with all of the tariffs and things that are going on these days. So no worries about that. If you wanted to support me directly, or you can support me by purchasing the book from Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, BarnesandNoble.com. I have links on the buy page to go there, and or other online bookstores and in selective bookstores around North America. If you wanted to get a digital version, I've got the digital version on the same buy pages. You can link directly over to Amazon to get the Kindle version of either, and or the Audible version. I have links directly over there as well. And there's also, if you wanted to ask me a question, you have to be patient. I'm running about 3 months behind on my emails right now. But I will get back to you. I try and do them in order. Go to contact the author and ask for a question, or if you wanted information on the elementals, I have a document on that. Or if you want information on something, just ask for it by a general topic. Don't ask for all my documents. I have way too many to send out, and you'd get lost in the shuffle. Be as specific as you can, and if I have a document on that, I'll send it to you. If I don't, I'll give you information that I have in my head that I just haven't documented on.
Nice. Awesome. Well, bro, I guess hang out in the green room and we'll be right back, okay?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks, brother. I'll see you in 2 seconds. All right. Well, that was amazing. Gary Wayne is the GOAT. Absolute GOAT. Like, y'all, I'm telling you, it's like I'm in kindergarten, like, my mind is jelly. It's like you connected so many dots, so many. It's like, man, just awesome. Like, I'm going to have to go back myself and watch this multiple times to even absorb it all, and I probably still won't get it, but oh man, amazing. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys go and check out the overtime, because we did an overtime. Be sure you're like, subscribed, and all that stuff. Go do the things, hype, all that. Yeah. And guys, get a hold of me. Send me an email or a message. If you guys want to come on, if you guys have something that you want to tell me or talk to me about, all that stuff. If you got something that you want me to talk about, or that you want to hear specifically about, shoot me all that information and I will make it happen for you. But anyways, there's not really a whole lot more for me to, get into here at the end and pull threads on, because the thread's done been pulled. Everything is connected. I've been telling y'all this, and this is just that much more confirmation, isn't it? So what's there left for me to pull? I've got to sit here and recombobulate my brain and sponge all this up, just like you. So, yeah, guys, I love you. Tookie, and peace.